U'sfartem lachem mimacharas haShabbos. And you shall count from the day after Shabbos, miyom heviachem es omer tenufa, from the day you're bringing this carbon of the Omer. So this is on Lag Baimer, and on Lag Baimer, of course, it's part of the days of Tzviras HaOmer. And Tzviras HaOmer is actually a mitzvah that follows, it's a biblical mitzvah, but it follows another biblical mitzvah, which is the Korban Omer. When we're looking at this commandment of counting the Omer, following after bringing the Omer, the pasuk said, as I read, you shall count it. U'sfartem lachem mimacharas haShabbos. You should count from the day after Shabbos. And the question is, what do you mean you count from the day after Shabbos? It's not from Shabbos. It's from Yontif. We're talking about the Yontif of Pesach. So why does the pasuk not say U'sfartem lachem mimacharas haPesach, and you shall count from the day after Pesach, which actually is what it means, instead of what it says, which it doesn't seem to mean, which is you should count from the day after Shabbos. And we will answer it toward the end of the Maimer. The second question the Rebbe says is, we have these two mitzvahs. The mitzvah of the Korban Omer, which was brought on the second day of Pesach, mimacharas ha-Shabbos, mimacharas ha-Yantif of Pesach. And then that night, we start the count, second night of Pesach, which for us, of course, is the second Seder. And biblically is definitely Chol Hamoed, because already the night before was Chol Hamoed, is when they begin the count of Tzviras HaOmer. So if we look at that carbon that was offered on the second day of Pesach, again in Eretz Yisrael, it is Chol Hamoed. It was a very unusual carbon because it was from a grain, and the grain was barley. And the Rebbe questions this barley grain carbon. Why does he question that? Because there are carbonos of animals, there are carbonos of birds, there are carbonos of grain. All the grain carbonos are fine flour, what we call soiles, the finest wheat flour, except for two carbonos of grain are not fine wheat flour. They're barley. The carbon soita and the carbon we're talking about right here, the carbon of the Omer. The Rebbe questions and says, the soita, Mela, we understand. I mean, our Chachamim say it straight. The soita, potentially on a certain level acted very inappropriately, animal-like. A soita is a woman who her husband had a suspicion of her and another man, and therefore he warned her. And he said, you are not allowed to be alone with this man. And she was. And we have witnesses for that. What they did, we don't know. If we knew, she wouldn't be a soita. We don't know what they did. But we know she was alone with the man that her husband said, don't be alone with. And therefore, the offering she brings when she goes to the Beis HaMikdash is of barley. Because that was animal food. And her action was like an action of an animal, so to speak. But what's going on with the Korban Omer? Nothing inappropriate was done here. This has nothing to do with a transgression on any level. It was the carbon that marked the difference between the seasons, meaning until the Korban Omer was offered, you were not allowed to eat the new grain that was grown that season. When the Korban Omer was offered, now we have officially inaugurated, so to speak, the season of eating the new grain. Of course, in Chicago, we hear of Chadash and Yashan. This is biblical concepts. And the Korban Omer was what allowed the eating of the Chadash, allowed the eating of the new grain. So we're not talking about a transgression on any level for anyone. So why was this offering a barley offering? So those are two questions we raise, and that second question we will answer relatively soon. To explain this, let's talk about something else, which is, of course, very traditional and stylistic. To understand it, let's talk about something else. So what are we talking about? What's the something else that we're going to be talking about? Let's talk about the whole processes, the stages of the Jews' redemption, including, of course, the period of time which we call the days of Omer, the counting of the Omer. So we know it's three stages. First, we have the Exodus, right? 3,300, 38 years ago, 3338. And then we have the counting 49 days from the Exodus until arriving at the giving of the Torah. And those three stages, the Exodus, counting of the Omer, receiving the Torah, are expressed in a pasuk from Shir Hashirim, Song of Songs, expressing the deep, deep love of Hashem and the Jewish people, so deep that we compare it to the love between a husband and wife. And in that metaphor of Shir Hashirim, the pasuk says, Moshcheni, draw me, acharecha narutza, after you, we will run, Heviani hamelech chedrav. The king brought me into his chambers. So the Rebbe says, if we unpack this pasuk, this verse, we have three stages. Moshcheni, draw me. Draw me is by the Exodus, because we were so weak and so low and 49th level of impurity. It was just like, Hashem, you want to redeem us? You deal with it. Mashcheni, draw me in the singular, because that's what Hashem did. He pulled out our soul. Once he pulled us out, and we had gotten out of the enormity of the evil of Mitzrayim, suddenly we start waking up. And when we wake up, it's not just that me, the neshama, the soul wakes up. My animal soul is also waking up to serve God. And therefore, the second phrase says, acharecha, after you, after God, na rutza, we, two of us, godly soul, animal soul, we will run. Now, actually, the Rebbe says, you know who starts running? Who do we blame or credit for the run? Is the animal soul. Because the animal soul runs. The godly soul delicately walks. The animal soul is like a racing animal. The godly soul is like a human. We walk. The animal soul runs. But the animal soul here is running to God. And since the animal soul is racing to God, this inspires and awakens the godly soul. So she runs to God too. So acharecha narutza, after you, we, godly and animal together, we will run. And then we reach Haviani Hamelech Chedra. The king brings me into his chambers, which is the climax of our relationship, Shuas. So Mashcheni, Hashem, you do it. Hashem pulls out our godly soul in the singular. Acharecha narutza. Now we're plural, animal and godly together, racing toward God, climbing the ladder of those 49 days of personal refinement until Haviani Hamelech Chedra, the king brought me into his chambers. So the Rebbe said that we understand then why it's a carbon omer, why it's a barley offering. Because this offering begins the counting days, the Sfiras HaOmer, right? We have the carbon omer and the Sfiras HaOmer. The carbon omer starts off what will happen over the carbon omer and Sfiras HaOmer, which is refinement of the animal. The carbon omer refines the animal, and Sfiras HaOmer refines the animal. So since we're talking about refinement of the animal, to express this, this is a carbon of barley. Today, probably like, wow, it's so great, it's so healthy, it's whole grain. And traditionally, like corn, animal food. So if the carbon omer and the Sfiras HaOmer are both impacting the animal, what's the difference between them? So the Rebbe says, the carbon omer is impacting the intellect of your animal soul. Sfiras HaOmer is impacting the emotions of your animal soul. Now, an animal is primarily emotional, very, very strongly emotional, with very tiny little brain. So we can understand then why the carbon omer is a one-shot deal and Sfiras HaOmer takes 49 days. Because if we're trying to refine the intellect of the animal, it's okay. The intellect of the animal is pretty weak. But if we want to get into the emotions, oh, that's a lot of work. There's 7 foundational emotions, and they each have 7 aspects, and we have to get into the nitty-gritty of our soul, our psyche. That's a lot of work. It's a 49-day process. So how do we know that the carbon omer is targeting the intellect of the animal soul? Because the carbon omer is a grain. It's barley. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't a bird. It wasn't wine or oil. It's a grain. And there's an interesting connection between intellect and grains. It says in the Talmud that the child cannot talk until he eats grain, which means eating grain, it says dagan, grain, a generic word for grain. It's not specifically barley, it's not specifically wheat, it's grain. Eating grains develops our intellect so we can be able to start talking and communicating. So the Rebbe says, therefore, grain is impactful on the intellect. So the carbon, the offering of grain, animal grain, barley, is to impact that animal intellect and refine it. And then we start counting, right? In the morning, second day of Pesach, Bayas will be Yantif in Eretz Yisrael. Of course, also today, Chol Hamoed. They cut, they harvest these first grains of barley, they offer them in the Beis HaMikdash, and that night begins the Sfira count. And the Sfira count, those 49 days, is to refine the details of our animal soul's emotions. Because that's what our animal soul is. It's emotional. It's an animal. And all those emotions we know quite well because we deal with them all day long, every day. We have different animals. Some of our animals are upset and some are jealous or vindictive or fall into a more depressive state or overly happy about not the right things. Like Yeah, we probably all know by now we probably all know our own animal. But we all have lots of emotions that we need to refine. Nerva says very interestingly that this mitzvah is actually a dual mitzvah. If you look, like, literally, it's a biblical commandment. Offering the Omer is a biblical commandment, and counting Zviras Omer is a biblical commandment. But the commandment has two parts of the count. We're supposed to count the days, or we're supposed to count the weeks. So the question the sages ask is, nowadays, when we no longer have a temple, is it still a biblical commandment? And some sages say yes, 100%. Midoraisa. It's written in Torah, and we're doing it the same way they did it by the time of the Beis Hamikdash. No difference. We're counting the days of the Omer from Pesach till Shavuos. Others say no. The count of Omer is connected to the carbon of Omer. So since we can't do the carbon of Omer, we are doing the count rabbinically. It's not exactly the same as in the Bible, biblically, midoraisa, because there's the carbon and then the count. Here we don't have the carbon, we just have the count. So it's rabbinic, which is also completely obligatory. And both of those opinions make a lot of sense. But then there's a third opinion, which is very interesting. And the third opinion says counting the days is biblical, it's midoraisa, and counting the weeks is rabbinic, which would imply that counting the days, we're doing just like they did in the time of the Beis Hamikdash. They counted days, we count days, counting the days. But counting the weeks is not like they did in the Beis Hamikdash. It's just, rabbinic would mean it's like a zecher. They did it. We're not really doing it, but we're doing something to keep up the memory of it in commemoration. So where is this one coming from? It's the same verse, count the days, count the weeks. So the days are biblical and the weeks are rabbinic. But the Rebbe says, based on what the Rebbe is explaining, that the count is this deep work through the intricacies and nuances of our animal soul's emotional palette. It makes actually a lot of sense, because the days are the details of the emotion, right? Like we know when we count, it's chesed shebechesed, and it's gevur shebechesed, and it's tifer shebechesed. It's the details of our emotion. The week, 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, is talking about the emotion in its totality. So the Rebbe says, nowadays, we can roll up our sleeves, flex our muscles, and work on the details of our emotions that we need to refine. But we can't really do the totality of it. So every detail, yes, that's the day, and that we are doing for real. No zecher, not in commemoration, real. But the weeks, the totality of the emotion, that we are not exactly doing. And that is a zecher. That is what we used to do, and we don't do it now, but we commemorate it by still counting. And therefore, the Rebbe says, that is why it actually makes sense. This thing that didn't sound like it made sense, that the days are biblical and the weeks are rabbinic. It's a very avoidic mimer of working on self, of refining self. That's what the mimer is saying in very, very simple, very avoidic terms. And that is really what these 3 weeks are about. These 3 weeks are weeks that we're supposed to be, commemorating. We're supposed to, of course, be learning Hilchos Beis HaBechira, that. And we're supposed to be working on ourselves. Obviously, most strongly, we want to work on ourselves in terms of Avos Yisrael, where we know it was the 3 big ones of idolatry, adultery, and murder that destroyed the first Beis Hamikdash, and it took 70 years to clean that mess up. And the second temple was destroyed because of baseless hatred. Baseless hatred means I hate you because you take up space, because you're taking up space minimizes my space. And therefore, I don't like you. And once I already hate you because you take up space, I can then figure out what my justification is. And we know we've been in Galus for 1900 years because it's been 1900 years of trying to refine this evil, which is hard to refine because we're still a bit stuck in it. But the Rebbe has told us that we did it. We did it. So now, have baseless love to combat baseless hatred. not because you're still wallowing in baseless hatred, but to live Mashiach. And Mashiach is a time when we'll have baseless love. But just as we have that one meter that, of course, we think about, really, in general, this is really a time to work on our avodah. These are 3 weeks to really focus and remember and try to really refine ourselves and utilize the time, not just in terms of like, oh, I can't do this or I can't do that, but rather to really get closer and make it a time that we can really refine our service and let the light of our soul shine through our animal soul. So the Rebbe here is going to go on to say that when we're looking at these midas, which of course every mida is comprised of 7, we understand that we really need to work through all of these. And the Rebbe is going to give an example. The example he's giving is from Chesed, because that's the first one. But looking at that example of Chesed, we can really extrapolate from there to all the other midos and how we're supposed to use them to refine ourselves and to serve Hashem. So the Rebbe is not starting on the side of the animal, because really, if we want to discuss this idea of refinement, it's very appropriate to discuss refinement on the side of the godly soul and use that light of the godly soul to serve Hashem. So we're going to look at Chesed on the side of the godly soul, and we're going to go through all 7 manifestations of it, from Chesed Sheba Chesed to Malchus of Chesed, and see how we can let our godly soul's light shine. So Chesed Sheba Chesed, Chesed is love. Chesed Sheba Chesed is when you see someone learning Torah, doing mitzvahs, learning with Yiras Shamayim, and you love them. Now, when you love that person, that love is really an expression of your godly soul, that your godly soul is so excited that there is this manifestation of godliness here in the world, that Hashem is being served. In other words, if I'm on a godly animal reality, if I see someone else doing something really special, I might feel jealous. But if you're really coming from a very pure place, pure meaning from a really godly place, when you see someone else serving Hashem, it's special. It's exciting. You're full of love and joy when you see Hashem being served this way. And that's why in the godly dimension, when I see another Jew serving Hashem, when I see another Jew learning Torah, doing mitzvahs, having Yiras Shamayim, I just feel an outpouring of love. And that's my godly soul's love for service of God. That's Chesed Sheba Chesed. Gvura Sheba Chesed is because you love Hashem so much, you have Gvura toward anything that opposes Hashem. Meaning, like a lot of times, I guess, 21st century America, we're sort of just love, we understand, and we're supposed to love, we're supposed to be warm, we're supposed to be gracious, we're supposed to be understanding, we're supposed to do a lot of things. But we're a little uncomfortable with the idea of Gvura, of disliking, of hating evil. No, loving good we get. That's appropriate. But hating evil? But it's really 2 aspects of the same energy. If you really, really love Hashem, Chesed Sheba Chesed, you see someone serving Hashem, you see someone learning Torah, you see someone doing mitzvahs, you see someone acting Yiras Shamayim, you love them. You love those that love Hashem. You love that Hashem is being served. And everything that has to do with Avodas Hashem, you love. And you yourself have such alacrity in Avodas Hashem, in serving Hashem. That's all your Chesed Sheba Chesed. You love Hashem, and therefore you love serving Hashem, and you love those who serve Hashem, and you love in as much as possible giving Hashem whatever you can. Chesed Sheba Chesed. That same feeling of love for Hashem, that foundational emotion of Chesed, in Gvura Sheba Chesed means a hatred. It's a very strong word, but it's the word the Rebbe uses, a hatred for those that oppose Hashem. Because if you love those that love, but you don't hate the opposition, then your love might not be real either. Your love is not exactly what it should be, because if it was, the more you love Hashem, the more you would hate anything that blocks Hashem's light from shining in this world. The more you would hate anything that hates Hashem. And it would, now again, you could say, well, this innocent Jew, I don't think he hates Hashem. He's just ignorant. Fine. So that's not what we're talking about. Someone out there fighting Hashem. We have many vivid examples of fighting Hashem. Those that hate us generally are those that hate Hashem. Those that hate Hashem generally are those that hate us. You see those haters. And our response is supposed to be hatred. Why would we do something so negative? Because that's the true expression of how Hashem feels and how we're supposed to feel for anything that opposes the light of Hashem shining in this world. So chesed, love of Hashem. Chesed shebechesed, love those that love Hashem. Love serving Hashem. Gevur shebechesed, hate that which blocks Hashem. Tiferes is the idea of like glory, beauty. It's like the wow. It's almost like a, we're on the winning team feeling. The wow. When somebody is learning Torah for real, like the Rebbe says, with a geschmack, like with pleasure. He's keeping mitzvahs with that geschmack, not like, okay, yeah, you do it, it's on the chart and you keep moving and you routinely know your rote. No, you're doing it with a passion, with a bren. You observing are like full of the wow of Torah and mitzvahs, the beauty of Torah and mitzvahs. You're full of the glory of Torah and mitzvahs. You're full of how amazing Torah and mitzvahs can be expressed in this world. And when you're looking at yourself, this is how we're supposed to feel. Like sometimes you're in 770 and you just like see, and it's like, wow. I look around sometimes sort of transcending the little details to the big picture. And it's wow. Simchas Beis Shoeva, you can look around and there's a wow. And that's part of how we should have our avodas Hashem. You need those wows. And maybe for me, Simchas Beis Shoeva 770, for someone else, it's something else. That's fine too. But part of serving Hashem is feeling the glory in it, the beauty in it, the geschmack in it. It's not just like, again, step one was chesed is love. Chesed sheba chesed, I love Hashem, I want to serve him. So you could love someone and do for them because you love them and they want this to be done, but it doesn't fill you with a wow. You're just happy to do it for this person, right? Like my children can sometimes talk to me about things that I have zero interest in, but I'm the mother and I'm interested in them talking to me and I'm interested in them being heard. So I very happily listen, but it's not like I feel, oh, wow. It's just, I love you. So therefore I'm doing for you. But Tiferes shebechesed is, I feel the wow of Yiddishkeit. It gives me this wow sense, which again, for some people, it might be a yantiv, moment, like a bar mitzvah, bris, upsharon. There should be those points that we have the wow in serving Hashem, because that's part of serving and loving him, is having that sense of how beautiful, how glorious, like how lucky we are that we can be part of this. That's what Tiferes shebechesed means. How lucky we are that we can be Ovdei Hashem, that we can be serving Hashem. It's a wonderful feeling to have, and it's a wonderful feeling to give over to your children. So those three, the chesed shebechesed, the gevur shebechesed, and Tiferes shebechesed, is using your soul. Your soul's godly, your soul's pure. We don't have to clean out the dirt in our soul. So what's my avodah here? Well, the avodah here is allowing your soul's voice to be heard. Yes, my soul naturally loves Hashem. I don't need to work for that. But I need to feel the voice of the soul. Chesed shebechesed, I have to pull out of myself. My work is to pull out of myself that love that I have, but am perhaps not feeling, to love those that love Hashem, to love serving Hashem. Gevur shebechesed, again, it's innate in my soul. My work is to pull it out, that I hate anything that blocks Hashem's light from shining in this world. Tiferes shebechesed, I have it. Pull it out. Put yourself in the situation and consciously release that feeling of the wow, of the joy, of the glory of serving Hashem. These are the main expressions of chesed. And then we come to the subsidiary ones. Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchus. So what's Netzach shebechesed? Well, Netzach is the trait of victory, right? Netzach is the commitment that creates the victory. So in terms of my relationship to Hashem and my love of Hashem and my avodah in this, Netzach Chesed is whenever there's anything blocking Hashem, blocking my service of Hashem, not giving into it, fighting it, pulling it down, going for the victory. In other words, a person could be like, well, of course I love Hashem, and of course I want to serve Hashem. And sometimes life doesn't let. I want to go to the class. Problem is I fall asleep before or fall asleep during. I want to go on Mitzvayim. Problem is I have no one to go with. I have nothing to give out. I'm tongue-tied and have nothing to say. I have no time. I have no vehicle. I want to buy the most kosher food options. Problem is it doesn't exist in my city. It's too expensive. My kids don't like it. In other words, the idea of the obstructions to serving Hashem, I don't want you to think of like an army coming on you where you might or might not have had in your past armies, not letting you light those Shabbos candles. But we have Nagdim. We have those forces that are stopping us and are obstructing our service. I would do it if it was easy and simple and everyone liked me for doing it. But sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes it's not simple. Sometimes everyone doesn't like you for doing it. So when you're in that situation, it's really like a chinuch mesiras nefesh. A chinuch mesiras nefesh meaning that you love Hashem. I love Hashem. But am I going to commit to go for the victory for him, especially when it's difficult? And again, difficult could be communally, like, it's difficult keeping up certain shuls and schools. And difficult could be inside yourself or in your relationships with other people. So just like if you can imagine with a person, you love your children and your child wants a certain supper and you love to do it for them, but it doesn't work out. And you love to spend time with them, but there's too many things pulling at you at the moment. And they need this, but you can't do it. So you have the love, but you might not have the netzach. The netzach is the commitment to the victory. It's not just, I love and I'd like to do this for you, but it doesn't work out. The netzach means it's going to work out. We're going to pull down any barrier, any obstacle. We're going to make it happen. The netzach is there's opposition. I keep going. I go for the gold. I go for the goal. I don't stop. I don't let opposition stop me. And then the hoid, the Rebbe is saying, is when you really can't do it. You can't. Like, there's no way this is going to happen, but you just overcome yourself and do it anyway. And that is the hoid. So as I'm saying this, does this resonate with people? Are people thinking of situations where they can say, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. I've experienced some of these things? Because it should, because we do hear the voice of our neshama. And we are sometimes in situations which is like, I want to do right, but why does everyone make it so hard? Give up because it's hard? Netzach. We love Hashem enough that we have netzach. We keep doing it. We do it with self-sacrifice. And hoid, well, hard, I know I can push, but this isn't hard. This is impossible. So I have to overcome myself. I have to overcome my own feelings of inadequacy, of I'm very small and the opposition is very big. I'm very not capable and I can never do this. And say, you know what? If it was about me, I could have that luxury. It's about Hashem. It's about his will being fulfilled in this world. I'm going to overcome myself. I'm going to overcome my own feelings that I cannot do this, and I'm going to do it anyway. So that's netzach and hoid. What's yesod? Yesod is the situations when, well, again, to understand this, yesod means connection, connectivity. So if yesod shebechesed, chesed is loving Hashem, yesod is, even if for whatever reason, you're not feeling it, you're not drawn to learn Torah, you're not drawn to do that mitzvah or the other mitzvah, you're not being pulled to do it, but because you do love Hashem, you connect and pull out of yourself a desire to do it. Meaning you say, it's another way of you overcome yourself, right? I'm sure we all have situations where we're not feeling it, or at least not feeling it for that specific mitzvah or that pushing myself to learn Torah, pushing myself to make another class, pushing myself to be there for other people, whatever it is. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes we're drained. Often we might be drained. A yesod is connectivity. Because I love Hashem so much, I use the power of connectivity of my soul to connect with all of these things that I'm not feeling, but I know Hashem wants me to do. And I love Hashem enough that I'm doing it. That's the yesod of chesed. And the malchus of chesed is when it becomes this all-inclusive experience, meaning I commit, I dedicate my thought, my speech, my actions, my everything to Hashem, to serving Hashem, to Torah mitzvahs, malchus, sovereignty. Absolutely every fiber of me is expressive of my love for Hashem. Now, the Rebbe said, I just gave you an example, right? There are 7 emotions for Hashem. We're talking here on the side of godliness. And the Rebbe says, I just went through the dimensions of one of them. Now, obviously, we could look at chesed, and we could look at chesed and gvur chesed, and we could come up with other expressions of our godly soul. And that's true. Because obviously, if we have 7 and they contain all the emotions, they're very multifaceted. But whatever you're saying, chesed is love. And your godly soul, it's love for God. It's also love for another Jew. It's also love for Eretz Yisrael. It's also love for Torah. It's also love for mitzvahs. Foundationally, it's love for Hashem. And starting off defining chesed as love for Hashem, though of course it's also all these other loves as well, all these other godly loves, like Eretz Yisrael and Am Yisrael, looking at each of these dimensions, each of these subcategories as, since I love Hashem, how am I using chesed? How am I using gevurah? How am I using tiferes? And I'm unpacking it a little because the Rebbe wants that we should understand what he just did, not just swallow it, digest, swallow, makes sense, easy, got it. No, the Rebbe says, I want you to get it enough that you can do the rest of the work yourself. Meaning you could figure out a gevurah and a tiferes and a netzach and a hoid and a yesod and a malchus and the 7 subcategories and focus on saying, okay, I have these powers. I have a godly soul. My godly soul is a piece of God. My godly soul is this enormous shining light of God in this world. How could I use her more? Are we using our souls? Absolutely. How can I use her more? How could I more let the light of Hashem shine through the light of my soul? The Rebbe now is going to go on the other side, which is the animal. Again, it's Sfiras HaOmer days. Now, of course, now it's not Sfiras HaOmer days. Now it's 3 weekdays. So I'm sort of taking the avodah of Sfiras HaOmer and applying it now. But it's not only, of course, letting the light of your soul shine more and more. It's working through the negativities, the darkness, the obstructions of the animal. So when we're looking at the animal side, we're going to look at the same thing. We're going to give one example. And we're going to give one example. It's going to be the model. And then we could say, okay, just as I understand that example, I could apply it to everything else. And of course, the foundational thought is Zel Umazeh As Elokim, which means this parallel to this God made. God made everything in our world balanced, or might not always seem that way to us, but really it is. There's always the equal pull on one side and the other side, the pull of the godly, the pull of the evil, the pull of the neshama, the pull of the animal soul. So if we understand in the neshama that we have 7 emotive traits and each of them subdivide into 7, that's exactly, of course, what's happening in our animal soul. Our animal soul has 7 emotive traits. And as we said, the emotion and the animal are very, very strong. Emotions in the animal are considered the core evil of the animal, meaning if you are doing a mitzvah right now, like hopefully you're with me learning Torah, so your animal soul, a part of it goes to sleep. We have 2 parts of our animal soul, intellect and emotion. The emotion is the core evil. The intellect is weaker. So when you are doing something for Hashem, you can actually pull in the intellect of your animal, and it can be part of the process. It's like hijacked, meaning it might not 100% want it, but it's being pulled in by the energy and it's part of it. But the core evil of the animal, the emotions are like, no way, I'm not part of this. And they check out. And if there's a lot of intense godly energy, they go to sleep. If you're saying, wait, I wish they went to sleep, they're still bothering me. Okay, so maybe the energy isn't intense enough. But if the energy is really intense, the godly energy is intense, the intellect of the animal could be pulled in. The emotions are checking out. They can't be part of the process. They go to sleep. So the emotions are really, really strong, and they have a lot of energy that's pulling us away from Hashem. And I don't think we need a dissertation on this. We live with this every day of our life. So the Rebbe says, when we're looking at the animal and we look at chesed, what's chesed? Well, chesed is love for all the things Hashem doesn't want you to love, right? What's chesed sheba chesed? It's all the pleasures and the loves you have in all the physical that you have such a desire for it. You want it so much. Now, depending on who you are, that could mean all the forbidden things in the world that God says no. It could even mean permissible things, meaning in Kuntres Umayin, the Rebbe Rashab speaks at length about this concept that don't make yourself animalistic. And the Rebbe there is not talking about forbidden. Then the Rebbe starts talking about forbidden. First, the Rebbe is talking about permissible and saying when your lust, when your pleasure, when your desire is all going for animal, vegetation, inanimate, the physicality of our world, like that's how you're defining yourself. That's what you're becoming. For an animal to be an animal, okay, they're an animal. What do you say? For someone who could aspire higher and transcend the physical, for him to be the animal, that's tragic. And of course, happens all the time. So our animal soul's love factor for the physical could express itself in us wanting another piece of that chocolate, which of now, of course, all is kosher because you're just fasted. Or it could express itself in wanting all the things God said absolutely no. Maybe it's a little no, right? We tell ourselves that's just a little no, which a little no is almost like a yes, or for sure a pass, or an okay, or everyone does it. It could be a big no. How do we get to those big no's? How do we even get to any no? The Rashab says, because every time your animal soul is oxygenated, every time she has a power over you, even in the realm of the permissible, she gets stronger and stronger and stronger. Some animal souls start off like wild boars, and some animal souls are docile. They might be a sheep. But the more you give them a voice, the more you give into them in the realm of the permissible, this is all permissible, it gives them more energy and more energy and more energy. And then they pull you and pull you and pull you and pull you way to places you said you would never, ever, 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 ever go. So the chesed is that desire, that love, that wanting I must have. And chesed sheba chesed is, that's it. That's your lust. That's your love. That's your pleasure. That's your definition of self in everything that Hashem said. No.